MLB Live, MLB This Week Podcast. We're talking all about the startup of baseball again, around the league with spring training. We have some great stories for you, talking about Giancarlo Stanton wearing a custom batting helmet. And all of a sudden we have a lot of fans in the showroom with us here live. Hello.
What's up, my niggas? How's it going?
All right. Nice to talk to you.
You too.
Nice to talk to you too, y'all.
And, gosh, you're all on the show. I've got to mute you here while I'm starting the show, though.
Oh, why?
Appreciate you
No.
joining. Okay, let's try that again as we're live here. And hello, everyone. This is MLB This Week. It's the MLB podcast, the scandal edition, we could call it. Josh Hamilton story, Alex Rodriguez, and the Pittsburgh Pirates being terribly sickened by a photograph. We're going to talk all about that on this edition of MLB This Week. Hello, everyone, and welcome to MLB This Week. It's the MLB This Week podcast. My name is Rich.
And I'm Gary.
And hello, Gary. Another great...
I'm King Julian.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us on the program here. It's great to have you along listening and taking part in the show. Gary, we had a great week of baseball. A whole lot of news to talk about. And why don't you lead off the show with the biggest story of the week so far in baseball?
Well, Rich, the biggest story probably this entire week has been the news, the sad news, sort of, that Josh Hamilton has relapsed. The Los Angeles outfielder has suffered what's being reported as a drug relapse involving use of cocaine and alcohol in the off season. And, you know, he's had a rough time, Rich. A lot of instances that have come up before with Josh Hamilton and his use of drugs and alcohol. And it's really a shame, quite a talent. And the question is, will we ever see him play again? Will he be able to get everything together? And at this point, Rich, it's not so much about the game of baseball. It's really about his life and getting himself straightened out.
Yeah, didn't really hear too much about this story. Not a big Josh Hamilton fan, but yeah, it is terrible whenever you hear something like this happen, especially a great baseball player. And of course, we've heard a lot of problems and scandals with baseball players over the past few years, but yeah, it's certainly not a good story. He's only about 33 years of age. Of course, he's making the millions of dollars, so those temptations are always out there. And but when you hear about a story like this, it just doesn't sit too well.
Yeah, and as I said, he's had tons of problems before, and when he was with Texas at one point, they even had a babysitter with him watching his every move. He wasn't allowed to carry money, and all sorts of things like that. And I don't know, I don't know whether, when he signed with LA, I thought that is probably the worst place for him to be with this type of problem. And it's just a shame, Rich. And as I say, let's hope he can get himself together and really get his life together, because that's really what's at the fight here now, is to straighten himself out.
Yeah, without a doubt. That's a tough story. And getting over to some positive stories, Gary, did you know that this is the last Saturday without a baseball game until at least late October? So we're getting through February here. As we've said before on our previous shows, the Northeast has had a tough winter. It's about 20 degrees out there right now where we're doing the show from. So spring is welcome, and so is baseball. We'll have it every Saturday on for the next several months.
Hallelujah, Rich. I'm certainly glad to hear that at this point in time, and had enough of the snow. Want to see some of that sunshine from Florida, and that's just great news to hear that baseball will be with us now until October, and I just can't wait to get the games going and get to see any. When are the Phillies going to be showing some games soon?
Yeah, the Phillies will be starting up their schedule in just a couple of days this coming week, and they kick it off with a college game down there in Florida, as they do every year. They play a college team down there, and it's going to be great. It's a welcome news up in the Philadelphia area with all the rough winter that we've had. Not as rough as some of the people up north around Boston and all, but I think people, despite the Phillies not projected to do too well this year, people can't wait for baseball to start.
Well, and I'm sure they can't wait for it in Pittsburgh either, but they're a little unhappy, according to your first story of the evening.
Yeah, the Pittsburgh Pirates reacting to a post by the BBC over in London. Of course, we know one of the most notorious terrorists to be featured on the internet over the past few weeks and months have been a guy that they had called Jihadi John. Over the past few months, they've been releasing videos from the ISIS terrible Islamic State, what they're doing over in the Middle East. They released a picture the BBC did of Mohammed Mwazi, who they say is this Jihadi John, and he had a Pittsburgh Pirates type of hat on in this photograph. Of course, the photograph was several years old when this person was a student. Apparently put this baseball hat on, and there was a picture taken of him in it. So Pittsburgh Pirates just very devastated at seeing that, and absolutely sickened is actually what they released their words about it. So tough break. It could have been any team that this person had the hat on for, and it's just a tough thing. Just tonight on the news, they were talking about how they are trying to hunt this person down. Of course, he's the face behind everything that's going on there. There's plenty of people that they'll be hunting down, but this person in particular is very sought after.
Yeah, and as you say, it could have been anybody. It could have been a Phillies, could have been a Mets hat, could have been a Yankees hat, which would have been okay, I guess, if it was a Yankees hat.
Would have been more the course, right?
More of the course, yeah. But you want to sell global products. This is what happens. So I don't take anything from it at all, and I don't think anybody should. But as you say, I can imagine how Pittsburgh would look at that and say, "Oh God, that's not what we needed."
Yes, that's for sure. And we want to thank our online listeners for stopping by here. They kind of broke into the show. The first time we've had a few live listeners here, Gary, and with the Hangouts, Google Hangouts is how we record it, and man, they just kind of burst right into the showroom here.
Yeah, I guess they didn't just get the watch invitation or whatever. I don't even know how they got in, but thanks for coming by.
Yeah, and thanks for listening to MLB This Week, where we do the show every week, and tonight is a special broadcast. We're doing the show live on a Saturday night here, the last day of February in 2015, and we want to let everyone know that listens to the podcast, you can stop by our website. It's called MLBThisWeek.com. A lot of features there you can check out. You can listen to our podcast on iTunes. Check us out on Stitcher Radio. and also listen over at baseballtalkradio.com, where you can hear the best in independent baseball talk. And Gary, next up on the show here is a great story. Giancarlo Stanton is going to wear something special this year.
Yeah, Rich, he's going to wear a custom batting helmet that will prevent, hopefully, a sequel to his beating of last season. And, we've been having some video gremlins, so I don't have a picture of it, but it's quite a nice-looking helmet. It's basically a helmet with a carbon steel face guard built to withstand 100-mile-per-hour pitches. It's a product of Shoot Sports in Illinois, which usually makes football helmets. And it's even stylized with a G in the face mask because that's how Stanton rolls. And, there have been other players that have worn the face mask, the face guard, but it's usually an extension of the helmet, and it's looks like a solid piece of plastic or whatever the helmet material is made of, a composite. This is more like a football. It's actually bars, and as I said, it's got a G fashioned in it. So, ironically enough, while he didn't get to check it out today, he did get hit in a simulated game by the ace Alvarez of his own team, but he got hit in the waist or in the butt. So I guess they got that over with, pitching him inside in a simulated game and hitting him, but it was nowhere near his head. So, but good idea for him to get something, and if it's going to make him feel comfortable, then he should. He should wear it.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, this afternoon I saw some tweets by some people that were down at Marlins training camp in spring training. They had tweeted out that, yes, Giancarlo Stanton was hit by a pitch this afternoon around his hip, but it was big news. There was about 10 tweets that came out all around the same time that he got hit by a pitch. Oh, my God, he got hit by a pitch. So yeah, it was terrible what happened to him, but that's one of the risks of baseball, and hopefully this helmet prevents any further damage to him.
Yeah, it would be. We don't, as much as we don't want to see him come up to bat against our teams in the NL East. He's a big talent, and baseball needs stars like that. So, I'm hoping that everything's okay, and he's the same player, and I'm sure Miami is, because they just invested, a few million bucks on him. So, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I think hopefully that contract works out for Miami, but that's something we're going to talk about all season long, I'm sure. That tremendous contract, I think it was $325 million. Over 10 years, so a lot of money there. And speaking of money, our next story up here, A-Rod, Alex Rodriguez, coming back to baseball this year after serving a whole year suspension, but he won't be at third base apparently. The Yankees in spring training here already the first couple of days moved Alex Rodriguez over to first base for the first time in his career yesterday. And apparently that will be his new home, possibly. The 39-year-old, of course, has gone through several stints of steroids, lying to the public. In fact, I just picked up a baseball preview book by Athlon Sports, the 2015 MLB preview, one of my favorite books that comes out every year, and there's a good story about A-Rod in this book. They call him a con man. Con man returns to the game. So there's a two and a half page article here that goes through all of what Alex Rodriguez has been through, and it's amazing that he is still in the game of baseball.
Not a lot of love there for Alex, I don't think, Rich.
No, I mean, you just read it. He's lied his way all through the years, in the last 5 to 6 years, telling the truth only a few times, but they really tell you the plain facts of the whole story here. Rodriguez paying a guy named Tony Bosch $12,000 a month for roughly 2 years, and this was the person that was just sentenced to 4 years in jail for doing all of this with various players, including MLB stars and minor league players, and anybody else that would pay him for his services. But it says that Rodriguez got filled syringes of hormone injections into his stomach. This Tony Bosch did, in fact, draw A-Rod's blood in the bathroom of a nightclub. So this is the kind of person we're dealing with. Millions of dollars seems to wash that stuff away. It makes those stories go away easier with certain people. But I think A-Rod, if anybody deserves not to play baseball anymore, his name would be A-Rod.
It's a funny thing. Came up on sports radio here in New York, and somebody said they were trying to compare him to Ryan Braun, and what Ryan Braun did was pretty sleazy too, fighting that and ripping that guy to shreds and everything. But the difference seemed to be is like he got caught the second time, Braun. He just kind of said, "All right, he got his 65 games. He took it." And, people are kind of softening to him now. A-Rod is a sleazeball. He looks like a sleazeball. He sounds like a sleazeball. He's just like a slimy guy. He's like a guy that you would expect to buy a used car from, or, something like that. There's something about him that's sleazy. This is my opinion, but I think this is why a lot of people don't like him and why there's such a backlash against him.
And I actually think a used car salesman is above A-Rod. The connotations of the used car salesman, we mean nothing towards the used car salesman, if anybody's listening, that sells cars to us. I understand what you mean. Yeah, he's a less than honorable person, and that's putting it nicely.
When you see him interview, he just doesn't seem, he's got the serious face on and everything, and he talks in this quiet voice. But it's like you're listening to it and you're going, he's full of what, and I just think he just comes off as a sleazeball character. And I think that's why there's a backlash. Because the Yankee fans, once he starts hitting, and probably any team would do the same, so I'm not going to point fingers at just the Yankee fans, but if he hits, they'll be cheering left and right for him. And I would imagine that most other teams the fans would have the same reaction. I would like to think that they wouldn't, but anything to help your team. But like I said in the past, if I were the Yankees, I'd be playing him at first, third. I'd even throw him at shortstop in a couple of games, and I'd have him hitting 15 times in a minor league game, or play a spring training game, then send him over to minor league camp and let him hit over there. And I'd work those hips, and I'd work those knees, and I'd work whatever else things he had wrong with him. I would work that guy until he was panting, and because the Yankees' sole thing is to get him to quit, so they don't have to pay him that money, and he's not going to quit because he's got $61 million coming to him, and if they cut him, they have to pay him, so they have to get him to not be able to play anymore.
Exactly, and like you said, he's going to stick around for the money. He's a slimy character that's lied his way through just about everything. And I just can't understand why baseball just couldn't ban him permanently at this point. The service of having him in the game is no longer valid. He's violated everything you could violate as a baseball player. So
the scary part is what happens if he can play and he starts hitting and he starts getting close to 700 home runs. I don't think he's going to do it. I think he's washed up. He'll probably catch Willie Mays, but I don't think he'll get any higher. But I mean, just what happens if he did? I mean, how is baseball going to take care of that then?
Yeah, as you said, if he catches on and gets on a hot streak, but I don't think he's going to be a Hall of Famer ever, just like all of the other steroid scandal players of the past. They have not really made it in. I don't believe he will either. But just to have him playing baseball is a black eye for baseball. They should have just banned him permanently and moved on. I mean, the guy has broken every rule, lied to just about everybody, including himself. And then he keeps apologizing with these insane type apologies. Save it. They should have just banned him from the game.
Well, I think some of these guys eventually will get into the Hall of Fame, but I don't think he will, and I think mainly because, as we were talking, I just think that because he said he only did it for a while when he was in Texas, and then lied and then took Major League Baseball to court, and I think for those reasons, I don't think he'll get in.
So we'll keep our eye out on Alex Rodriguez and his career as it continues in baseball this year. And Gary, you have a story, the MLB possibly thinking about shortening down the season.
Well, Rob Minford is taking over as commissioner, Rich, and he's not afraid to do anything, and he's looking at all kinds of things. And he said this past week that he would entertain shortening the regular season if there was enough interest to do so. He said that discussion of season length is not at the top of his mind, but that he would have an open mind if anybody brought up the matter. And his main concern right now is pace of the game. And as we discussed last week, they implemented the new rules for that. Interestingly enough, up to 1961, they played 154 games. The American League moved from a season of 154 games to 162 games in 1961, and the National League followed a year later. So I don't know what it would do to the record books. I mean, there are plenty of records now that reflect 154 game season. So, but then would they have to put the records that were broken between 61 and whenever, if they did implement this, they'd have to put an asterisk on all of that. Football does that, though. I mean, they had a 14 game season, went to 16 game season. So they speculate that, but. Any change, of course, would have to be collectively bargained with the Major League Baseball Players Association, since it does affect the working conditions of the players and could change the number of service days, currently 183 in a season. So they'd have to talk to the union, but I don't know. Maybe it's not a bad idea at this point in time to shorten the season, being that they've lengthened the postseason. Perhaps it's something to look at.
Yeah, and that's just, I think, the direction the game is trying to go. They're going to try to shorten the regular season and extend the postseason more so than they have already, and that I think is probably going to be a mistake if they tried to do that. I can cite hockey and basketball. The regular season practically means nothing.
Yeah.
Why even bother to go? It's like 2 seasons now with both of these sports. You've got the regular season. It doesn't seem to matter because everybody gets in the playoffs just about. And the true season is where they're making the extra money, charging you twice and 3 times as much to go see the games in the playoffs. So, yeah, I don't think this is a good idea. I really don't. I'd rather see it stay with the 162-game schedule. It's worked for years. I don't see all this push towards eliminating games. To me, it doesn't really mean too much in a good way.
Well, here's what I would do. If they were to do that, what I would do is then, instead of a one-card wild card game, make it 2 out of 3. That's the only change. And you'd move everything up a week at the end of the season, and they could play that wild card series 2 out of 3, play it in 4 days, have a travel day there, and or for that matter, don't even have a travel day. Let's just do it in 3 days, 1, 2, 3, get it over with, and then a day off, and then go to the regular playoffs. That's the only thing I would do. I would add those 2 games. I would not change anything in the playoffs. I wouldn't add any other teams, but I would make the wild card series 2 out of 3.
So we'll have to see what happens with this, and that's kind of what I liked a little bit about Bud Selig, even though a lot of people didn't care for him too much. He was sort of a conservative on the side of keeping the game somewhat intact for the longest period that he could. But I think this new commissioner is just starting too many different things too fast with baseball. But we'll have to see what he does in the future.
And according to your next story, you might be considering something else in spring training.
Yeah, this came out of nowhere. I just read this today. Major League Baseball considering playing future spring training games in Cuba. Not this season, but Baseball Players Association President Tony Clark said Saturday there have been ongoing discussions about playing exhibition games in Cuba, which recently renewed diplomatic ties with the U.S. Clark said there were several conversations about Cuba hosting games this spring, but there wasn't enough time to finalize those details. So apparently we'll be seeing some spring training games next season if the relations still go well. Of course, relationships between countries can sour pretty quickly, but right now it seems like the U.S. and Cuba are in an affair, sort of the way they have been in the 40s and 50s. They used to hold spring training camps in Cuba in the 40s and 50s. And the Cincinnati Reds even had a AAA affiliate in Havana before everything went sour there and we became enemies, so to speak. And, of course, Fidel Castro banned professional sports there. So you never know, Gary. You might see some exotic location next year from Cuba with baseball.
Well, it may not be such a bad idea. It's a short distance. I know the Cuban refugees that have come to this country will not be happy about that because they don't want to see anything going to Castro or anything of that regime getting any extra money from baseball or any support. But I think if we're opening up relations as much as we can, I think it's bound to happen. And look, we're starting to get an influx of Cuban players here, and I think that's the whole reason why baseball would want to go there, to make it more straightforward and easier for these guys. So, they're always looking for a new area of untapped talent. That's why they went to Australia. That's why they've gone Mexico, and they're getting talent from these countries. But it's a money machine, and they got to keep feeding the beast to keep it going. And they got to open up new markets. So that's the nature of the game.
And the funny part about it, of course, is Cuba is still communist. People aren't free to do what they want over there as much as we would think they would be. So it's not a situation where those people live in a democracy. Of course, as you said, the cost of living down there is a lot lower. The government probably has to sponsor most of the salaries for people, things like that. But all of a sudden, Castro is opening up to the West and the capitalism. He's trying to welcome in some change there. And I don't know if you saw, Gary, but some of the pictures coming out of Havana when they first announced that, it almost looks like that country is in 40 or 50 years ago, or maybe even 60 years ago.
Yeah, I think they're stuck still in the 50s. I know you see on the streets they claim that there's a lot of like 1950 Chevys and 55s and 60s.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, the majority of the cars look like they're from the 50s and
yeah.
60s.
Because they're not getting the products. They're not getting, we had an embargo, and Russia really didn't help them that much. And Russia had their own financial problems. So Cuba was on their own. They still have cigars and sugar cane, I would imagine, unless they've destroyed that completely. So they do have the basis for an industry. It's just that they have to. I guess it'll be interesting to see what happens when the Castro brothers, both of them, pass away, and they're left without leadership, or whether or not whoever takes over that's picked by the Castros is more of a like a Gorbachev, where willing to embrace more capitalistic ideas and get this country running, because it's just not in good shape.
No, it isn't. And moving on with some information for you to listen to our show, of course, is pretty simple. You can take us on the road with you with Stitcher Radio. Follow us on Twitter. We're at MLBThisWeek. And we generally do the shows all season long. We're kicking off our first few shows of spring training for you this year, but we're going to have a whole lot of information for you. And we appreciate you listening to the show and stopping by.
Yes, and check out BaseballTalkRadio.com for all of the great shows on that network.
Yes, indeed. Gary, you have a show, or a story rather, and a show on the Baseball Talk Radio Network, Mets Musings. So check out Gary's Mets Musings podcast. And you have a story coming up here on the show tonight, a haze over Greg Zaun.
Well, Rich, last week or 10 days ago, something like that, Greg Zaun, the former Major League catcher, came out and made what was, I guess you'd say, he alleged that there was a lot of rookie hazing, and gave detailed accounts of it, and led by Hall of Famer Cal Ripken Jr. and others on the Baltimore Orioles. And Cal Ripken Jr. and others, Brady Anderson, Chris Hoyles, and Ben McDonald, the pitcher, all came out and denied it and said it was nothing more than just horseplay. But Zaun has backed off on these claims and says that what he said was exaggerated and in some instances fabricated. He said that the harsh treatment supposedly led by Ripken actually was nothing more than a little horseplay, a little tomfoolery that is common throughout the majors. He remains friends, Zaun does, with many of his old teammates. But why come out and say something like this at this point in time? And it just sounds like it was just normal horseplay with rookies. They taped him to a table, supposedly. Ripken used to wrestle with him in the floor at the back of the team charter if he passed an imaginary line. You know how that stuff goes with rookies, and it's been denied by a number of players, though, that said it never took place and it never happened to them. So whether Greg Zaun was just trying to get some publicity, I don't know why. He's got a good job with Toronto as an analyst. Don't know. He's even backing it off now and saying that it was just normal activity. But amazingly enough, he's still friends with some of these guys, and Cal Ripken talked to him about it, and he apologized to Cal Ripken and said he used the wrong words. So there was no abuse, no hazing. It's another instance of a guy saying something and not thinking, I guess, before he says it, and causing a lot of trouble. And maybe it's just the society that we live in that you can't even get in an interview and say something that, without it being taken, in other words, and taking in this political correct atmosphere and having these press guys run with it.
Yeah, and I do believe there is probably a lot of hazing in baseball, and certainly none of it gets talked about. A whole other side to the game that nobody gets to see except for the players. But yeah, I believe a lot of that exists. I don't believe he made the stories up, but as you said, he probably was in an interview and mentioned it and went further upon mentioning it, and things that were never supposed to be said, quote unquote, about the things that actually happened behind the closed doors in baseball and the clubhouses each year. And he actually said that he was taught respect by the older players, Cal Ripken, a few others. And that's what these players do. They don't want these rookies coming in thinking they own the place, so they teach them who's boss, so to speak.
Well, there's been some criticism. The Mets and a number of other teams do this. They make the rookies towards the end of the season dress up when they're on a road trip, and they put them in these stupid costumes. Sometimes they make them dress up as the Mets, for instance, 2 seasons ago had all the rookies dressed up as bridesmaids and a bride in a wedding party, and they had to go to the airport and fly home like that. And last season they was dressed up as superheroes, a number of female superheroes, but you know what I noticed in the pictures, that these guys were having a good time with it. And as you said, I think it made them feel like part of the team. It made them feel like this is a rite of passage. There's no hazing. It's just a little embarrassing, but you know what? People know it's a team. They're on a charter flight, so there's no public really seeing them, and they had a good time with it. And I know a few years ago they had a rookie who was a little self-centered, who is no longer with the team, and his name escapes me. But he refused to wear it. He refused to wear a jacket and tie on the road, and wore a T-shirt. And at the end of one game, he found his T-shirt ripped to shreds, and there were words in his locker that said, "Learn your place," or something to that extent. And I don't see really anything wrong with it. It's nothing. Nobody touched him. Nobody, smacked him around or anything. Yes, they ruined his shirt, but they did it to teach him a lesson. And believe me, he was a handful and is no longer around. Miami is your problem now. But I think you do have to have a little something going on. I'm not advocating hazing, but I know people were annoyed at the Mets with the dressing up and everything. But I think that's why the Mets have been putting it out on Facebook and Twitter now when they do it. So it kind of tempers it, as if to say. And you can see the guys are all laughing and smiling about it and having a good time with it. As I said, I think they're learning respect, and they feel like it's making them part of the team.
Yeah, that's well put there. We started off tonight's show with some kind of tough topics with baseball, but we're going to end out here with a decent one, a more lightheaded one. Note here, of course, we've been talking about the minor league teams and the different promotions that they're coming up with this year and many years in the past in their attempt to attract more fans, things like that. And on the video screen, if you're watching the video podcast, I just put up a link which is flashing. Why, I do not know. But you can see there that it's the web gremlins here on Google Hangouts. But the Wisconsin Timber Rattlers, they have a new food promotion, a couple food promotions for the 2015 season. On the left-hand side, if you're watching the video, you should see the funnel cake burger. And then on the right-hand side, the grilled cheese bacon burger. And that thing's about 4 stacks high. The Timber Rattlers have added the 2 new burgers, and they're sure to be a food lover's dream and a cardiologist's next paycheck.
You're making me hungry, Rich.
They tweeted out the burgers out, and as well MLB, which is minor league baseball, tweeted it out on their Twitter feed. And the first question that pops to mind, it says on this article, is how you take a bite out of one of these sandwiches, because they're literally about 6-8 inches high.
Very carefully.
Very carefully if you don't want to drop it all over yourself, that's for sure. So some great stuff there, minor league promotions. I think it's awesome that they attempt to bring in fans with these fun promotions. I don't know if anybody will buy one. One thing they didn't mention is how much they'll cost either.
Well, you know, we seem to do stories on food quite a bit. We did some a while ago on Major League food, and people bought it. So I think it's like a challenge. You know, it's like you're on vacation. You'll spend money on extra things, or I think it's the same with a ball game. You'll take a chance on something crazy like that just for the heck of it, to see if I can eat the whole thing or whatever. So I'm sure they'll do okay. Geez, I got to check around in Brooklyn this season and see what if they're adding anything special.
That's for sure. Well, we appreciate everybody stopping by to listen to this edition of MLB This Week, the MLB This Week show with Rich and Gary. We're going to have a lot more great baseball talk for you next week. Of course, the spring training season starts off for many teams, starting up Tuesday or so. So we'll actually have some games to talk about. And Gary, you have a great week, and we'll talk to you again on the next edition of MLB This Week.
Okay, Rich, you do the same. Still live.
Let's see. That's because I can't find that picture that I just took. I can't find the exit to stop.
Take it easy.